Welcome everyone. This is our Phius Alliance Chicago monthly meetup. My name is Jennifer Ham. I am on the board. I'm the secretary, and I am very excited to be introducing John Loercher, who is going to be the presenter for this month's meetup. Just a little bit about John. He's a professor of architecture, a CPHC instructor for the Passive House Institute US, and owner of Northeast Projects LLC. He's a certified passive house consultant, and he holds a master's of architecture from Parsons the New School for Design. His firm, Northeast Projects, specializes in passive house design, high performance building envelopes, and advanced energy modeling. John joined the Phius certification team in 2021, where he provides design review, updates the existing certified passive house consultant training curriculum, and helps expand the advanced training offerings at Phius. And prior to joining the certification team, John has been an active CPHC since 2016 and has certified all building types, ranging from single family and multifamily residential, commercial, new construction, as well as retrofits. He also serves on the Phius Alliance Hudson Valley chapter board. I had the pleasure of learning from John at my recent CPHC Phase 2 training, and I was very grateful for all the extra information he provided from his personal experience working with many Phius projects. And he is here with us today to discuss the Phius CORE Prescriptive path. And one of the major goals for Phius is to make passive buildings mainstream, and the prescriptive certification standard is a major step in scaling up passive buildings in the single family sector. So welcome, John. Thank you for being here. I will hand it over to you now.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. That was a great introduction. Let me just see if I can share my screen. We can get started. All right. All right. Everyone can see that okay? Awesome. Well, thank you for the invitation from the Chicago chapter. Like Jennifer said, I'm involved in the Hudson Valley chapter. We're actually rebranding to the New York chapter, so hoping to reach the rest of New York State a little bit more. But anytime an Alliance chapter reaches out, I can definitely sympathize with what it's like to put on so much programming with so much specificity. So I'm always glad to help out where I can. I hope this is a useful presentation for you guys. This will be all about the prescriptive path. I would imagine some of you in the audience have seen the prescriptive path already, if not maybe used it a bit. So we can really tailor this to what you guys would like to hear about within the presentation. I'll put my chat open. I know that Phil is here as well to help just go through some of the Q&A. And also James Ortega, the Phius certification manager, is here. So I invited him just to be part of the conversation as another Chicagoite himself, and also the creator of the prescriptive path. So we should have all of the people that we need to answer all questions here tonight.
Yeah, I'm basically auditing the course.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming anyway, James. Essentially, before I get into the slide deck that I have, I do want to just mention that from personal experience working with the prescriptive path over the past year or more has been kind of an interesting ride. I started when the prescriptive path came out. I had a number of projects that were right kind of in the sweet spot where we could still look at the prescriptive path, but I may have already had an energy model for them. So I started looking at a couple of these projects to see, okay, what's the difference, between the traditional performance path and then the prescriptive path? How much time could I potentially save by using this? And then on the Phius staff under the certification team started to review a lot of the prescriptive path submissions as well. So I really got to know this very intimately. And also because it was such a new way of certifying, we also kind of had to start to weed through all of the potential little problems in a really rapid way. So I also really witnessed this whole path really progress and kind of evolve over just the past year. So I've already think it's made a lot of really huge strides and helped a lot of project teams certify with a lot of savings, which we'll talk about in a little while, savings in a couple senses. But I'm also really excited about where this could potentially go in the future as well. So as more and more projects are getting certified using the prescriptive path, I really do see potential for it going into different building types in the future, or just being something that's more widely adopted to help make more single family projects Phius certified more quickly. So the title of this presentation is Phius 2021 Core Prescriptive Path from Start to Plaque. So hopefully we'll really go over as much of this as possible. But again, like I said, just feel free to stop me and ask any questions along the way. Also, I'm sorry, I'm having really bad allergies, so I'm a little stuffed up. So just forgive me for any nasally kind of overtone. So we will look at the protocol design and from a very kind of zoomed back perspective, and look at the goals of the protocol design. What were we trying to achieve by implementing a checklist-based certification protocol like this? Coupled with that, the criteria development. We'll look into getting started, principles and case studies. So I'm going to show a couple of projects that I had worked on early on as the prescriptive path was released, and take a look at a couple different projects or through the lens of these individual projects to look at the individual principles so we can understand what those principles look like when they're actually applied to a building. And then of course some resources at the very end just to help you get started if you would like to start using this. So the original idea of this prescriptive path is Phius has been certifying climate-specific performance path projects since 2012. Now we have over a decade of data. The projects have been certified under many different climate, locations, different project types, but majority of those projects have been single family detached residential projects. So that's really what the core of this prescriptive path is, right? We started certifying performance path projects with single family detached homes, and then we're kind of starting this pilot, where it's not a pilot anymore, but full program of the prescriptive path with this same typology. We are accepting some duplex projects as well, so it's not always a single family detached, but there are some limitations obviously as far as the overall size of the project. And the idea is that we've done this, like I said, for over a decade now. We've certified these projects. We get post-occupancy data and feedback on some of these projects. And this has really allowed us to really hone the performance metrics for different climates, right? So kind of built into the checklist, which isn't just a dumb checklist, it's actually quite a smart checklist, right? It's still very climate specific. Right. So in order for it to be climate specific, that checklist needs to react to whatever that particular climate of the project is. Right. So the checklist reacts to the particular climate of the projects and tells you what the specific performance metrics will be for that, not only that climate, but that size of the building as well. So we're going to see that in a little while. Some of the other goals were to make certification accessible for more CPHCs. We see that a lot of CPHCs still struggle with WUFI energy modeling. I teach a lot of the WUFI classes, and I still learn things about WUFI that are new every day. So, admittedly, it is quite an intricate program. It's very powerful, but there is a barrier to entry with that. But on the flip side of that, every CPHC can fill out an Excel spreadsheet, right? So we'll open the actual Excel, which is the kind of base of the prescriptive path, and we'll actually look at the most recent version so that you guys can see what that looks like. You will see some outdated screen captures of the checklist in this presentation, but there's always new versions being released on the website that you guys can check out. Back to the goals. Remove some of the investment in energy modeling, right? So there's that cost, that barrier of entry, but there's also investment in both time and money, right? We either have to pay someone to do that energy model for us, we have to pay in our own time, we have to pay in bruises as we're banging our head against the wall trying to learn woofy, right? So there's a lot of resources that go into that essentially development of that kind of integration of WFI and other energy modeling programs into our practice. But also by taking that energy modeling out of the process, there's a whole kind of feedback loop in the very beginning where you have to design a project, then model it and see if it works, then go back and adjust it, right? So if you think of it from that perspective, with this checklist, it just gives you all of the requirements from the very start. Right. So there's no question of what, R value am I going to need in my wall and my roof, et cetera. The result of this is a reduction in the overall certification timeline. On average, we're seeing prescriptive path projects get certified in about 2 to 3 rounds, whereas although that's very possible for a performance path project, we're usually seeing maybe more like 4 or 5 rounds. Within each round of review, there's also far less data points that need to be checked. So the actual review process itself is far simpler as well. We allow for more than just CPHCs to submit for pre-cert as well. So it really opens up to professionals who may not have training in WFI energy modeling. It helps support the rapid development of single-family homes. So you could imagine a development of single-family homes. If you were to have to do an energy model of every single one, it could get pretty costly for that developer. Within this model of the prescriptive path, you can easily apply essentially a prescriptive path checklist and associate that with a model home. Right. And then as long as the orientation of that is within 45 degrees of cardinal direction, you can have that checklist actually live with the model. And then lastly, it's it's essentially related cost-effective solution for large-scale community development. So really can simplify the overall certification process in a big way, which we can apply to just a single project, or we can open that up to a larger community development, which we're starting to see. So just giving you a kind of diagrammatic idea of the overall certification processes kind of from between the performance path and the prescriptive path. Again, just kind of reiterating this idea, the first kind of portion, which we call like a feasibility study for the performance path, it's where the designer has to design something, right? And they need to figure out, okay, roughly, what are my R values going to be, et cetera. They need to hand that over to whoever's doing the energy model. Ideally, they would even be the same person, but we all know there's many ways of working. And there's this kind of dialogue back and forth between the energy model and the draftsman, the drawings. So we could go back and forth many times within this feasibility study phase, which ends up taking more and more time, right? Finally, when we have enough information to feel confident that we can approve this, a particular design to move forward with certification, we've already eaten up a few weeks, ideally less than that, but it can take, like I said, a lot of time. So what I'm trying to say is there's a huge period before we can actually submit a project for Phius certification, right? And there's a large amount of unknown because in the active energy modeling, we're just trying to come to an energy balance. So there's so many dials that we can turn, and there's such a requirement for specificity that it takes a long time to get to a point where we can feel very confident that our building is actually going to pass all the requirements. So again, with the with the prescriptive path, the checklist will just outline all of the requirements that we need to hit from the very start, right? So theoretically, you might not even have, you might have a schematic floor plan or rough square footage of your building. You would be able to enter that into the checklist and know all of the attributes that you need to design for. So from the start, you're one step closer to that pre-certification review with Phius. And then, of course, the once you're submitted to the Phius review queue, you're likely going to experience slightly less rounds of review, right? So round 1 can be 6 to 8 weeks. Round 2, 4 to 6 weeks. Round 3, 2 to 4 weeks. So if we just start to cut out some of these additional rounds of review, we're also going to obviously cut down our overall certification time. And the idea behind this is that, again, we know how to do single family projects. We have a lot of certified builders that are coming into the market, a lot of design build firms coming into the market, and we want to allow for these builders, potentially these raters and verifiers, to submit for pre-certification as well, right? Like I said earlier, previously this was impossible because they didn't have that WFI training, right? So for performance path projects, it requires a CPHC to be the design professional to submit to Phius, but the prescriptive path will allow for all Phius professionals to submit for design certification. When we move into the construction phase, it's identical to the performance path. We still do need that Phius certified rater in order to provide all of the on-site QA, QC. And essentially, they're going through all the prerequisite programs in an identical fashion to the way they did in the performance path. So from the rater's side, there's really no significant changes for the prescriptive path. Obviously, the rater should know that this is a prescriptive path project, as some of the requirements, performance metrics, etc., might be different than what they're used to on the performance path. But all of the prerequisite programs, zero energy ready homes, EPA and/or Air Plus, EPA WaterSense, they're all to be adhered to, and we need to go through those programs in the same way.
I think I have one thought here too, John, to add
Sure.
with the rater thing. The only other major thing that I can think of that's a difference is that obviously the rater's never going to have to talk to the CPHC necessarily about like, hey, what did you put in WFI for this or something like that? Like
Right.
they should also have access to this checklist, and it's in Excel. So they should also be able to open it and review what was looked at during design certification. They can even like see the comments in line too, which I think is helpful.
Yeah.
Which, potentially previously wasn't something they might necessarily have been able to have access to, or unless they have the WFI software themselves, they're not going to be able to see those notes and that design.
Right. And as you were saying that, I also remembered there is one slight difference for the rater, and that there is a preliminary blower door test required as well, which we'll see in another slide.
Did you say that WaterSense was required? WaterSense certification is required?
Yeah. So the main difference here is that, for performance path, we would build this out in WFI, right, using the individual pipes tab in order to check that compliance. Here, we're not doing anything on the design side. It's just going to be verified by the rater in field.
And then is it typical to have a rater submit a project?
We have not seen that yet. As far as I know, I just worked with a rater in Massachusetts essentially to mentor him through his first one. It's really, very achievable for the rater to do on their own. So I think for his next one, he's going to be doing that.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Also to note, we only have, a small handful of fully designed certified prescriptive path projects right now. We have a number more that are going through project review, but only probably less than 10 that have actually been design certified still to this point. Okay, so one of the big designations here that we should point out between prescriptive path and performance path is that prescriptive path is a subcategory of Phius CORE. And really what that means is that we can't go all the way to that net zero certification that you would get with Phius 0, right? So obviously, I think the big reason for this is we don't have an energy model, right? So really the idea here is that we're focusing on the core of the Phius CORE certification, which is quality, health, and durability. We're achieving that through the required thermal resistance values, air tightness of the building envelope, as well as moisture control requirements, which we'll see in a little bit, those passive conservation strategies, which are kind of doing dual duty with what I just said, and then of course active conservation strategies. So we will see towards the end of the checklist, there are prescriptive requirements or performance requirements for your mechanical, ventilation, your heating and cooling devices, as well as your electrical appliances in your building. The big difference being without our energy model, right? So our performance path requirements, we're always going to have those space conditioning targets, and those are going to be climate specific, as well as the net source energy targets. Obviously, without that energy model, we're not using those as a check to see if we're passing or not. Essentially, these are just baked into the checklist, right? So based on the information within the checklist, we're using space conditioning targets to generate the thermal resistance values, essentially, right? So you're still getting yourself a Phius envelope, and you're still hitting those kind of similar space conditioning targets, but the way that we're complying with those space conditioning targets is just making sure that we're hitting all of the thermal resistance values and other performance metrics in the checklist. But essentially air tightness and then that QA, QC, again, are going to be identical for the projects, two really strong requirements that we have for the prescriptive path. Okay, excuse me, guys. So within this criteria as well, we do have some limitations. I had said this earlier, that we're really focusing on single family detached, but we are allowing for side-by-side duplexes as well right now. So these are the two typologies that are allowed in the prescriptive path currently. We do have some other limitations. Form factor, or the compactness of the building, is something that will be a limitation, as well as your designing for the prescriptive path. And it's going to be one of the first things that you're going to want to check. Essentially, we'll put in the ICFA of our building into the checklist, and we will get a maximum area of surface enclosure, or enclosure surface, right? So based on the ICFA of the building, it's going to give us our envelope area and a max envelope area. So we need to stay within that. That's going to help make sure that we're keeping our buildings more dense, smaller, and trying to avoid those kind of McMansion typology. But it also is a barrier for our energy modeling metrics, right? So our energy balance we know will stay and kind of work the way it's supposed to within a certain form factor. So we're trying to make sure that we're staying within that form factor. Similarly, there's a occupant density of less than 900 square foot per person. Again, trying to keep that form factor kind of limited within this certain typology. And then no fossil fuel combustion equipment. So that's where we're very similar to Phius 0 certification. No jetted tubs or indoor pools because of the additional moisture load on the inside of the building, and then no natural draft fireplaces. So these are all the limitations for the prescriptive path. All right. So assuming you are good to get started on a prescriptive path project, there's a couple things that you should know. First, if you go to phius.org, there's an updated version of this snapshot tool. This is a really great place to get started for both prescriptive path and performance path projects. You can see up at the top, you put in your location. It'll give you your climate zone, the ICFA of your building, bedrooms, and number of stories, and it will give you a bunch of really useful information. So this information will either be your prescriptive requirements, or they'll be, arguably conservative starting points for your performance path project. So we can see for this project in Alabama, we have a maximum solar heat gain coefficient, requirement for an overhang over the windows. We have a compactness requirement, minimum U values and R values for all of our assemblies and windows. And then we have a bunch of performance metrics for our mechanical ventilation as well as our mechanical systems as well. Now, there's a bunch of information that is not in this snapshot that does show up in the checklist. Right? So that's why this is a very good tool to start with. You can design your building envelope and the kind of big parts of your design with this. But the next step would really be going into the actual checklist and expanding some of these areas. For instance, the appliance requirements are missing from the snapshot, etc. So obviously those are kind of more detailed items that you would go to later on in the design process. We can move from that snapshot, create the actual design of the project. With that design of the project, it's going to be really important to use takeoff drawings in order to show the different values that you're putting into the checklist, right? So I'm showing a couple drawings with a project that I had worked on, essentially doing a takeoff of just the window areas, and this is something that if you're used to woofy modeling, you never have to do a window area takeoff, right? So this is kind of a new process that we're trying to train our CPHCs in right now, which is just, yes, you don't have that energy model and it's saving a lot of time, but in a way it kind of puts more emphasis on the drawings to make sure they're super clear and to make sure that the whoever's reviewing your certification on Phius's end can really see what the logic is for the different areas that you're entering into the checklist. So you'll submit the checklist along with the construction documents, as well as your data sheets for all of your installation types, different equipment, appliances, etc., windows, just as you would for a performance path project. Ideally, you get pre-certified before you start build, but we all know that story. Essentially, going through at a certain point, there's a handoff when you get from pre-cert over to the Phius rater to make sure that they're kind of in line with the construction schedule and they know when they need to show up to start verifying things on site. So like I said earlier, that whole rater verification section is going to be identical to the performance path. Okay. So I had mentioned this already. The checklist itself, the construction drawings and takeoffs, and then the data sheets. I think this would actually be a good time. I'm going to take the new checklist onto the screen to show you the most updated version. This is where I'm going off script a little bit. This can be found at phius.org. I'll pull that on right here. So if you go to phius.org, we do have this section right here where you can download the checklist. And I'm showing you that because we update this often enough that it's worth checking before you start a new project, just to make sure that you have the most up-to-date version. As soon as you open it, you're going to be prompted with a password, and it's going to say right in the prompt, type in Phius 2021. So it tells you the password right within that box there. You type that in. All that's doing is actually enabling the macros, right? So even though this is checklist based, it is still kind of a smart checklist, right? There's a lot of things that are attached here. So when you put in that password, that's actually enabling the checklist to work correctly for you. What that also, thank you, Jen. What that also does is allow you to expand and contract the different individual sections, right? So as we're seeing it right now, everything's contracted, right? Or minimized. But you can see there's 10 sections, 0 through 10 down here. Now, if you go all the way to the left, if you go to project information, for instance, you can start to maximize each of these individual sections, right? So we can go through each of these one at a time and really focus in on that individual section. You'll also notice that over to the right here, we have all of our feedback built right into the checklist, right? So you don't need a separate Excel where you're going to go back and forth the way that you did with the performance path. Right now, what we can do is you'll put your user notes for your first submission here, right? So if there's something you need to clarify, hey, this is found in this folder, you know, hey, this is pending, we don't know what it's going to be yet, whatever it might be, you can put that kind of initial information in your user notes. After you submit for the first time, Phius will submit their comments. There's a place for you to respond to those comments as well. And this is where you're going to notice it's very similar to the performance certification feedback form. So I will also note there are a few other alternative paths that you can find within the checklist. We won't really have the time to individually go through this in detail. We do have a training, a 4-hour workshop, which I'll offer at the very end here in case you're very interested in that. But one of the kind of high level updates that I will show you is that we do have some alternative paths. Let's say you're working on a project in New York, your required R value for your walls is R42. The best you can get is R40, right? So we have right here what's known as the UA alternative. Essentially within this UA alternative path, you can put in all of the performance values of your walls, your roof, your floor, and it will come up with essentially a weighted average based on the U value and the area of each individual assembly. So if you can't hit the requirement in your walls, you can make up for that in your roof, or you can make up for that in your slab, right? By adding additional insulation in those areas, right? So we have an alternative path within the thermal enclosure. We also have an alternative path within our lighting appliances and water heating as well, if you can't hit those specific performance metrics that we lay out in that section. Okay. So again, unfortunately, we can't go through each individual section in depth here. I will also just point out section 10 is going to be somewhat new in that each project needs to be electric vehicle ready. This is actually just a requirement for Phius 2021 certification in general. Okay, so I'm just going to skip through a little bit these. I do want to make plenty of time for Q&A at the end, but just to give you a little bit more of like some of my experience working on projects with the performance path, prescriptive path. These were the number of projects. There's 7 projects in total that I looked at in both WFI and the prescriptive path, ranging from climate zone 6 to 4. So somewhat of a range, but admittedly not really getting into the cooling dominated climates here. So these top 3, all with North River design builds, these are all design certified now. You can see the forms are somewhat limited, right? Very kind of boxy geometries. The easiest thing to hit the compactness is going to be, this kind of 2-story shoebox form. We did start to play with that geometry a little bit, elongate a bit for this LT residence, but that really just kind of came right up against the requirements, compactness requirements. Project number 4 down here, Wellfleet, we had a lot of inside and outside corners. We had a lofted living area, so we were not able to hit the compactness requirement with that. So you can see, as we start to open up from that kind of shoebox typology, makes it a little bit more challenging. A large part of that was the lofted ceiling. Riley residence here, very shoeboxy, easy geometry. We actually ran into a problem with the enclosure itself, which we'll take a look at in a few slides. Similar compactness problem with this project in Cornwall, New York, because of the lofted ceilings. This is just a single-story building. And then the final one, Wild Oak Passive House, actually they wanted to go for source 0. So it was kind of a good change, but unfortunately we could not verify that within the prescriptive path. Let me just jump around a little bit here. Okay, so some highlights within this that were kind of learning experiences. The air tightness is going to be a little bit tighter for the prescriptive path. The requirement is 0.04 CFM per square foot rather than the traditional 0.06 CFM per square foot. Really, this helps make sure that we're hitting those energy metrics, but it also is a big resilience piece. The more airtight you're building, the more safe the assemblies themselves are going to be from condensation risk, etc. Sorry guys, I'm just going to skip around a little bit here to kind of give some high level points. Another learning experience was solar protection. This is going to vary based on the individual climate zone that you're designing for. So no matter what climate zone you're in, there is going to be something relative to solar protection. And it might even be that you need to have the proper surface area of window in order to get solar heat gain into your building. So climate zones 5 through 7 are all dealing with only your net gain score. Essentially, you need a minimum amount of surface area of glazing. When you get into climate zones 0 through 3, these are your lowest climate zones. You're going to be dealing with a max solar heat gain coefficient, but also a fixed overhang requirement. So these are the climates where you're trying to reduce the amount of solar heat gain in your project. And then, of course, you get that sweet spot in climate zone 4 where you have a max solar heat gain coefficient, but then also a net gain score. So you have a little bit of heating dominated and a little bit of cooling dominated kind of strategies within that climate zone 4. skip that as well. I guess another note on thermal bridging, within section 5, which is on the thermal enclosure, this really forced us to really define what a thermal bridge is and how we are including that or not within the building review. So within the prescriptive path, we've defined thermal or continuous insulation as insulation that is uncompressed and continuous across all structural members without thermal bridges other than fasteners and service openings. And we've also identified a minimum of R10. So as long as you have a continuous R10 around structural members, we will say that you're thermal bridge free within the prescriptive path, right? And the whole idea here is that we need to be thermal bridge free because there's no energy modeling within the prescriptive path. So ideally, as we continue on with this path, we're going to be disallowing therm models along with it. We're just going to be assuming that all the details are designed as thermal bridge free. As of this moment, we're still making some exceptions as CPHCs are kind of getting up to speed with that. Okay, so I should probably just end on these resources. I apologize, we're going through this really fast. The certification guidebook has been updated to include prescriptive path guidance as well. So you can always check out the certification guidebook as you're going through your first prescriptive path project. I will also mention we do have this prescriptive path workshop. It's a 4-hour online workshop where we really get to start with a project, a sample project, and go through every single point within the prescriptive path, discuss and break down each individual input. This also goes into some of the program overview in a more in-depth way. A deep dive into the checklist, and then, like I said, we work through the prescriptive path with that sample project. So that is my last slide. Again, I apologize, I skipped a few things, but I'll share this slide deck with you guys. So if you want to, take a look at it again, that's more than fine. And I think we still have a few minutes for a Q&A if anyone has anything.
Hey everybody, this is Joe with HPZS.
Hey, Joe.
Hey John, thank you for the presentation.
Of course.
I had 2 quick questions. This one is like a little nuanced, but on the ratio of ICFA on screen, it said ICFA to bedroom. I think you said ICFA to occupant, because I think occupant is typically like bedroom count plus 1. So is this literally per bedroom or is it per occupant?
That would be per occupant.
Well,
So sorry, go ahead.
There's 2 separate requirements. So there's a compactness one, and then if you go up to the general tab, John, there's one that's for, we're trying to avoid McMansions basically. So you need to have a minimum of 1 bedroom for every 900 square feet in your project. So if you had an 1,800 square foot home, we'd expect that to have a minimum of 2 bedrooms. If you've got an 1,800 square foot home and you're saying it's a studio apartment, like that's not, that's a little bit not what we're going for here, basically.
Okay.
And then the second requirement is about the actual ratio of square footage to surface area. So it's 2 separate pieces.
Okay, thanks. That definitely helps to clarify. And my next question, sorry if I missed this early on, but is this for new construction only or for retrofits?
That's a really good question that we've been getting actually quite a bit lately. It's theoretically for both. The problem is going to be your thermal bridge analysis. So we have made some exceptions for projects that still have thermal bridges that we flag, and we'll do the thermal analysis and kind of move the project through. But ideally, in the future, we want zero energy modeling associated with the prescriptive path. So it's really going to be, it depends on the retrofit. As long as there's not an excessive amount of thermal bridge analysis, it could potentially qualify.
Okay, good to know. So yeah, just thinking out loud, if it was a retrofit where we were able to do continuous exterior, like adding continuous exterior, that would probably be a good candidate, sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And then probably you would end up, with depending on the slab condition or the floor condition, you might have to use that UA alternative path if you have some limitations with insulation on specific areas. But I think there's enough flexibility that it could be possible for a retrofit.
Joe, you'll also want to take into consideration the requirements for Energy Star, which is a requirement of Phius. So John was mentioning that there's no modeling that's required, but as part of Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Homes, you have to do, like, if the rater's going to have to do that modeling.
Yeah.
And there are using an existing structure can sometimes be a little bit tricky. You just need to look at the various considerations with, like, vapor barriers and things like that to make sure that you're aligning everything. So it's not impossible, but it's just something that you'll want to talk through.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question. Nobody.
Okay.
John, at the beginning, you started, this is Pam Hutter Architects.
Hi.
At the beginning, hello, and thank you. This was good. At the beginning, you started saying that you had looked at prescriptive and performance for the same project for a number, and that you had gotten familiar with what the ramifications were for each. And did you cover all that material, or is that is there more bottom lines to hit there? Like, is there situations where we might be going performance, but we wish we were going prescriptive, or we were going prescriptive and we wish we were going performance? I'm not trying to game the system, just trying to
No.
be most efficient for clients.
Yeah, no, of course. So I don't have that one-to-one comparison documented yet. That's something I'm working on now that a couple of these are actually design certified through the prescriptive path. But essentially what I have found is, largely you have to think about there's pretty significant difference in the air tightness, right? So through the prescriptive path, you already have to design for a tighter air tightness. So naturally, when you go to the performance path, right, and you have a looser air tightness, the energy balance is already starting to shift, right? So it's not, in a sense, it's not apples to apples, right? Just because of that air tightness itself. But you'll also probably notice, and I noticed this on these top three, this is a firm that I had done a number of performance path projects with, and our standard wall was always R38. So we had to essentially make a decision of, do we just continue to run with our performance path projects and put all of that time into energy modeling, when we knew that was going to disallow us from using our typical wall assembly. So we had to thicken our typical wall assembly, which adds cost, obviously, right? So we got into this kind of interesting, like, do we put the cost into the soft costs, where we have to then run an energy model in order to save an inch or two of insulation, or do we put the money into the insulation?
Yeah.
So again, I haven't really put this all down on paper and kind of thought about it much more than that, but it was an interesting kind of point of conversation that I had with the architect there. Generally, the prescriptive path is going to be a little bit more conservative, right? We don't have a way to verify the compliance of all of the metrics, so it's just built into the path itself to be more conservative.
Well, I think it's a welcome change, and the first Phius project we did. And I worked with Tom Bowman on it, and he kept saying, you know, there's a prescriptive that's coming that this would be perfect for, but it wasn't out yet. So we did the performance, but we had met your air tightness for the prescriptive. I'm looking forward to using it. Second question, the Wild Oak passive house you talked about, why were you happy? What was the problem with that in the prescriptive that then caused it to be happy that it went performance?
It was honestly, it was really just it was an architect's home down in Blacksburg, Virginia, and he is a CPHC himself. He really wanted that Phius 0 certification, and because we had done both the energy model and looked at the prescriptive path, it's not like it was going to be an extra cost to then do the energy model. So we just went that path because that's how he could get that source 0.
Okay, I thought it was something about the construction or something they were doing that made it more difficult. Okay.
No, but another point on this, and like Lindsay had said, the Phius rater is still doing their own energy modeling for the prerequisite program. So, a biggest kind of blind side is a lot of clients want to know, like, how far is X amount of PV going to get me, or how much PV do I need to be net zero? Without the energy model, you're blindsided with that question, right? The CPHC has no way to do that, but some of the tools that the rater is doing could be good resources to say, you should add extra panels, or whatever the advice might be.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think the one exception I would note, John, to like, it's typically more conservative. The only times I've seen it where it's not is if the site is really heavily shaded. So like if you've got a really heavily shaded site in a cold climate where the performance path is, trying to rely on solar gains for that project.
Yeah.
We've seen sometimes that where you're actually trying to hit the heating demand, which is expecting a fairly open site for the most part.
Right.
Those situations I've seen where the performance path has really had to push it hard to hit the space conditioning targets, whereas in the prescriptive path, you're just set, you're just told what your R value is.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, since this is checklist based, you can't really account for site conditions very well. Even you'll see that the way that we have to orient the buildings, it's essentially 45 degrees, cardinal.
That's a new one. We do have it, so you can do it a little bit more granular than that, but that's relatively new. But yeah, you're generally right.
Sure.
John, this is Steve down in Charlotte.
Hey, Steve.
I literally, for the first time, have a house that may be simple enough to be able to consider for a prescriptive path situation.
Yep.
And I'm literally on the brink of almost starting a WUFI model for it. But I just happened to remember this and saw this presentation coming up. So your timing's perfect. Do you have any kind of an idea, fee-wise, what the difference is in your experience between doing the WUFI model as compared to going through this prescriptive checklist? So I can give the client some kind of idea, if I do it this way, it's going to be X, and if I do it this way, it's going to be Y. And then I can explain to them the difference between the two paths and, give them the data to make a decision, in other words.
Yeah. I haven't done a prescriptive path as a consultant for a little while, to be quite honest, Steve, because honestly, it doesn't make much sense for me. It's a fraction of the time. I mean, really, it's a question of if the drawing set from the architect is good, doing a couple takeoff drawings. So what does that take? Maybe an hour or two for a project of this size, and then maybe 2 or 3 hours getting to know the checklist and fit and putting in values. So you could have an entire checklist filled out, ready to submit to Phius within a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the builder is very experienced in ICF construction, so that's what they're going to be using on the house.
Yep.
So again, the air tightness situation shouldn't be a problem going from 06 to 04 on it either.
Right.
So
Right.
it's almost like I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the client if I don't strongly consider the prescriptive. But I'll be honest with you, I'm intimidated by it because I'm not used to before. So
Sure, sure. First thing I would do is just check out that compactness. If you can meet the compactness requirements for the prescriptive path, I'd say likely you're going to be able to hit most of the other requirements pretty easy. The compactness has always been like the one that really is like the kind of telltale sign if you're going to be able to use it or not, especially if you have like ICF, like you're saying, and you know you're going to be able to hit those air tightness requirements.
the big benefit of this one is the prescriptive. For me, from a WUFI standpoint, the site information, especially if you have a very shaded site, trying to get as-built information for site conditions on a project is absolutely insane down here. And
Forget it.
it's a major cost, and it's so I can see if the prescriptive path could be satisfied, it eliminates that big complication right off the top. It's huge.
Absolutely. It ends up being a lot of coordination, right? Just if you're not hitting a metric within the checklist, just, you know, figuring out what do I need to do to hit that, you know, and getting the documentation for it. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to be respectful of everyone's time. If you didn't notice, I put the Phius CEU self-report code is in the chat. It's 22132. Forgot to share that slide in the beginning. I guess if there's more questions, we have the meetup where you can add a comment and we can try to get those answered.
Cool.
Otherwise, yeah. Thank you, John. That was awesome.
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. It was good seeing so many of you.
Yeah, thank you. That was fun.
Cool. All right. Well, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Good night.